Good day, madam. Please prepare yourself because right now we are about to dive into the world of bank stability where numbers dance and money talks. As the saying goes, they say money can buy happiness, but have you ever seen a sad banker? Our presentation title today is Islamic and Conventional Bank Stability, a case study in Malaysia. Before we begin, allow me to introduce my team members who have mastered the art of turning financial data into something exciting as a Saturday night. The first one is Noshiratul Shafinas, second myself, Nordini Izzati, and next is Aiman Aman. So I will pass to Shafinas to briefly explain about the introduction. Don't miss me because I will come back later.
Assalamualaikum and thank you, Dini. I'll start this presentation with the introduction. In general, financial system stability refers to preventing both significant disruption and the failure of a large number of financial institutions. Financial stability. What is financial stability for a bank? Financial stability of a given bank reflects its capacity to be solvent and remain so under difficult economic conditions by means of capital and reserve account. The IMF developed financial soundness indicators (FSIs), including measures related to bank capitalization, asset quality and profitability in order to provide complementary information about the health of a given bank. Maturity transformation is at the core of banks' role as a financial intermediary, depositors and borrowers. Banks are inherently exposed to bank runs. Many depositors attempt to withdraw at once. And next slide, I'll pass to Dini.
Alright, let's continue with literature review. First up, we have Tang Study, where we peek into the financial security in Malaysia banks in the turbulent times of COVID-19. What did we find? We find Islamic bank emerged as heroes, demonstrating greater stability compared to conventional banks. Now, let's dive into Matthew's research and the Edman-Zek score. This is our crystal ball into predicting bankruptcy. Why is this so relevant? Well, we found it on finding, especially those about bankruptcy risk, and guess where the spotlight shone the brightest? Yes, it is banking industry. Last but not least, we dive into the insight from Wahid and Dar's analysis. With the IMF Financial Soundness Indicator and Z Score Index, what did we discover? Drumroll please! Islamic Bank didn't just hold their ground, they excel, especially when we consider bank size. Quite an eye-opener, right? So now, let's discuss about the methodology with Finas.
Thank you, Dini, for this methodology used in this empirical study. The bank stability is measured using the financial soundness indicator based on the literature review. So a model for predicting bankruptcy called the Z-score analysis that also referred to a measure of financial distress. Related literature done that has confirmed in order to measure the banking stability, the most fashionable research analysis nowadays was based on Z-score's methodology. This paper examines whether Islamic banks are more or less stable than commercial banks. As mentioned in the introduction, it is capacity to be solvent and remain while financial shock. The data pooling period for the analysis is from 2005 to 2010. Macroeconomic data was obtained using an online database from the Monthly Statistical Bulletin of Bank Negara Malaysia and the International Financial Statistic (IMF). The final sample has 228 observations in it. Data from 21 commercial banks and 17 Islamic banks were gathered from Malaysian consolidated and unconsolidated annual report. Regarding all of the samples used in this study, the information collected for Islamic bank. The information is obtained from published copies and online publications such as the bank's annual report and the consolidated and unconsolidated bank statements of different financial institutions in Malaysia.
Now let's venture into the heart of our study, the hypothesis. We firmly propose that Islamic banks demonstrate greater stability than conventional banks. To solve the financial puzzle, we turn to our key metrics, the Z-score and the non-performing loan (NPL). The Z-score, a comprehensive metric considering profitability, leverage, and asset quality. Additionally, we assess loan portfolio quality through the NPL ratio. Next, the grand reveal comparison result. Islamic banks take the spotlight with the superior average Z score, indicating strengthened financial security. But let's break it down a bit more. Our finding shows that Islamic banks on average have a lower NPL ratio, suggesting they have a higher quality loan portfolio. Now, the moment of truth. Verification. The data speaks volumes, strongly supporting our hypothesis. Islamic banks emerge as the guiding lights of stability, outpacing conventional banks in the realm of financial fortitude. Before I wrap up this hypothesis section, let's acknowledge this study limitation. While our analysis provide valuable insight, it's crucial to note that we focus on two key metrics and may not encompass all external influence, including regulatory changes, economic shift, and management practices that could play a role in the financial picture. In wrapping up, I want to express my gratitude for all the attention you have given to me, because I didn't get the same level of attention in my previous relationship. Okay, that's a joke, by the way. Thank you so much, and I will pass to Shafinas to continue.
Thank you, Dini. For this slide, I am explaining the variable in this case study method, which the impact of analysis allow us to assess potential risks to financial stability for conventional and Islamic bank. The respective variables are shown in this slide. Z scores and non-performing loan NPL typically serve as dependent variables to assess risk for both commercial bank and Islamic bank. The components of profitability ratios, return on assets ROA as a proxy for bank return, equity leverage ratio as a proxy for financial buffer, and standard deviation of ROA as a proxy for return volatility, combined to form the Z score measurement. The bank's NPL ratio serves as the dependent variable. If an asset is not serviced for a while, bank typically consider it non-performing. Short-term late payment result in a loan being identified as past due. When a payment is more than 90 days past due, the loan is considered non-performing. A high percentage of non-performing loan values is a sign that a bank is having trouble currently, meaning that it is making less capital and it's more subject to default. The study's independent variables and control variables are cost-income ratio, total asset, loan assets ratio, Herfindahl index, income diversity, market share, real GDP growth, and inflation.
Anas, thank you so much for handling the variables, and now I'd like to move on to the main findings. By going through the elements which are responsible for stability within a banking system, we can come to a few conclusions. First of which is the fact that Islamic banks and conventional banks contribute a risk of about 30.03% and 33.14% respectively, meaning that there is a difference of 3.11% between Islamic and conventional banks, as you can see by the graph provided. Moving on to the second point, by observing Z score and NPL, we can determine that the higher Z score often leads to a more stable and is a sign of stability and safety within a banking system, whereas NPL is often a sign of negativity or a sign that something is unstable or there might be some risk within the banking system, which is already a very complex situation. But to add on to it, there is an inverse relationship between Z-score and HI, by which when HI is increased by 1%, Z-score drops by 0.00543%. It should be noted that there is a significance here of about 5% in HI. Moving along, LAR, total asset, and real GDP growth are all critical indicators of stability. What I mean by that is when LAR is lower, it could result in a drastic increase in Z-score. Not to mention that Z-score and real GDP have a positive relationship, meaning that an increase in GDP may result in a higher Z-score, which, when combined with the other factors, would make for a more stable banking system. Additionally, differences in CIR, HI, inflation, and market share between conventional banks and Islamic banks make for a varied landscape navigated by both models. Conventional banks tend to have a larger market share, and so by observing these banks, we can determine that an increased market share may result in a drop in z-score or a drop in stability. For every 1% increase in market share, there's a 0.709556% increase in NPL and a 0.02945% decrease in z-score. Throughout the previous slides and throughout the whole study case, we have proven time and again how Islamic banks tend to be more stable than their conventional counterparts. But the most important question, arguably the most important question in the whole case study, is how does Islamic banks manage to achieve maqsad al-Sharia, or how do they manage to achieve the principles of Sharia? Well, to understand that, we have to go through the 5 main principles of Sharia. First of all, we have to go through wealth preservation, or hifd al-mal. We see how Islamic banks manage to preserve the wealth of its investors, businesses, or even individuals who deposit their wealth within this bank. Having a bank that can safeguard and keep assets is beneficial not only to the bank, but it also contributes to the principle of Sharia, of preserving wealth. When wealth is preserved properly and safeguarded, it results for a more stable banking system, which in turn allows more security and more freedom to its users. Moving on to the next principle of social justice, or al-adl. An Islamic bank avoids the use of interest-based transactions, which may sound slightly different to what the principle states, but there is a reasonable explanation. When an Islamic bank avoids the usage of interest-based transactions, it refers to the prohibition of charging excessive amounts of interest to people who borrow or take out loans. It's considered unfair or disingenuous when a certain amount of money is lended to someone in need, but then when it comes time for repayment, that amount has now doubled or tripled from its previous principle. And thus we protect social justice and enact it by avoiding transactions that have interest or transactions that are interest-based. Moving on to the next principle of economic equality, or taqasum al-mal. The Islamic bank's tendencies to be more ethical and uphold the ethics and the principles of Sharia make for a more suitable banking system to enact the principle of economic equality. It's possible to reduce the economic disparity that exists between classes and fostering a more inclusive economic environment. Moving on to the next principle, which is the well-being promotion, or hifd al-nafs. Within this principle, we find ourselves asking the question of how Islamic banks can preserve the self, or well-being of its users. Well, you see, a more stable banking system, such as an Islamic bank, tends to allow people to have less conflicts with each other and with the financial facility themselves, indirectly promoting a more positive experience for the people involved and preserving the well-being of its users and anyone involved within these transactions. Finally, I'd like to move on to suggestions and recommendations. First of all, for fostering a more Islamic-friendly banking system, we need an environment and incentives that help Islamic banks grow and develop and become more prominent. Second of all, for a more stable Islamic banking system, advertisement, or rather awareness and education at early stages and in all stages of society would be necessary as to spread awareness among the population and among the entire nation and its residents. Doing that helps foster a more Islamic-friendly banking system, but also it attracts investors and stakeholders as well. Furthermore, encouraging collaboration with conventional banks. Where it may seem that Islamic banks and conventional banks are competing, it ought to be where Islamic banks and conventional banks exchange information and collaborate so as to form a synergy and foster a more healthy economic system. And finally, risk management for financial institutions. It is necessary if Islamic banking is to become more prominent and take a larger market share that a robust risk management system be put in place in the framework we placed early on and ahead of any potential risks, so as to minimize any risk that may happen, or even minimize the effects of any potential financial disasters that may happen within the economy. Now I'd like to pass on to my group mate for the conclusion.
Thank you, Aiman. To conclude this, it has been investigated Islamic and commercial banks in Malaysia using a holistic microeconomic view. The research model was developed which comprised 4 independent variables and 4 control variables measured with 2 different set of dependent variables, which is Z-score and NPL. Towards that, the findings of the study show that Islamic banks exhibit higher stability. The variables that have been identified as the significant factors toward impacting Islamic bank risk, which probability to default, which is cost-income ratio, total assets, Herfindahl index, market share, inflation, and real GDP. Strong empirical evidence emphasizes the resilience of Islamic banking in Malaysia. It is significant finding, but study limitation is acknowledged. Therefore, it increased the appetite for future research to validate and extend this conclusion on other findings. Thank you for watching our videos.